Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Welcome to the new season of The Courage Effect. I am so thrilled to have you here, and I am so happy to be bringing our show back into regular rotation for you. Today's conversation is with Jill Angelo, a true pioneer in the women's healthcare space. She's the founder and former CEO of Gennev. It's the nation's leading virtual menopause clinic. It's the first one of its kind. This is a conversation not just about leadership and Jill's larger journey, what she learned, not just through founding and scaling Gennev.com, but as a woman and also as someone who is really bringing a very important topic to the forefront, menopause. We are talking about it more, but there's still a certain amount of stigma around it. I want to talk about a few of the stats with menopause. 1 in 5 women have considered leaving a job because of their menopause symptoms. Menopause symptoms cause an estimated 1.8 billion in lost work time and productivity every year in the US alone. $1.8 billion. We're talking about symptoms that are impacting women every single day. I have experienced them myself. I've gone through a lot of this. But we need to be having more conversations about the brain fog, about the hot flashes, the anxiety, the insomnia and sleeplessness. It is epidemic with women who are experiencing menopause. And also, let me talk to you about the costs. Healthcare costs are 47% higher for people in menopause. So it's really important to make sure that they are getting the right care at the right time and have the insurance to help cover it. It does not just impact the women that are going through it. It impacts their partners, their families, their communities, and their businesses. So let me give you a little bit more information about Jill and the conversation you're about to hear. Jill Angelo is a visionary leader in women's health and midlife. With 9 years of experience as the founder and CEO of Gennev, she built and scaled the nation's leading virtual menopause clinic, providing evidence-based medical and lifestyle care for women across 50 states. And in 2022, Jill successfully led her company through a merger with Unified Women's Healthcare. And up until a few months ago, she operated as the president of Gennev and of United Women's Healthcare Virtual Clinic. Prior to that, Jill had a career at Microsoft, working in corporate executive and product management roles. She's also a member of the board of directors of the Special Olympics in Washington. Jill was named one of Inc. magazine's 2020 top 100 female founders. She really is a driving force. And right now, she's taking a very well-deserved break since she left Gennev.com just a few months ago. This interview was prior to her departure. You will hear about her journey. You will hear about some of her recommendations and how important the community is for us to get care, not just for ourselves, but for all of the women in our lives. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to The Courage Effect. Thank you for being here. Jill, it is such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
This is a conversation that I have been very much looking forward to. And as I said when I met you and had reached out to you about potentially being on the show, because I've known about you for a while and I've known about Gennev for a while, because as you know, somebody who is in my menopausal years, it's one of those things that is very front of mind. And as far as educating myself and having the conversation with good friends and just, women in my larger universe around the care, because I feel that we grow up and our society doesn't necessarily help to have these conversations. So as I've sort of gone through my menopausal journey over the past few years, it's been very helpful for me to know what's out there. And you have been a trailblazer in many ways, not just as somebody within the menopausal sphere. I don't know if you've ever heard it that way before, but as a woman and as a leader and as somebody obviously in my local community in the larger Seattle region. So you have inspired me in ways that you haven't even known before I've met you. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it's super kind. You set out with a goal based on what you just really want to go after. And if you can support and inspire people along the way, that's extra added goodness. So I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about when you founded Gennev, because you obviously had quite, what, 20 years at Microsoft, was it?
Close, about 15 at Microsoft and about 5 at another tech company prior to that.
Okay. I'd love to talk to you about that decision to make the change, because obviously, when we talk about courage overall, it takes courage to take a leap. But you were going into a territory which was pretty new and really uncharted in a lot of ways. So, talk to us about that move.
Yeah. I had a great tech career at Microsoft. I loved it. And I, as with so many companies, they offer a sabbatical benefit. And we were going through a reorganization. So it was a natural transition point for me. So I thought, I'm going to take my 3 month sabbatical. I'll come back in a new role and, we're kind of off to the races. So I was going out for a little bit of a refresh period. And during that time, I met a woman who had a vision. She was older. She had a vision for a menopause company and just said somebody needs to solve this issue of women getting to this stage in life and feeling unheard, dismissed, not seen, all the things. And I was 40 at the time, and I wasn't yet in that time of frame. I wasn't in perimenopause yet at that stage. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. Let me hear more. And so I booked a ticket and I flew to Los Angeles where she was living. And we had gotten connected through a mutual friend. And the more I learned and the more she said, somebody's got to start this company. She said, I think it should be you. And I've never planned to start a company, let alone around menopause. But I was intrigued enough that I did not go back to Microsoft. And I thought, I'm going to give this a go. And so at the time, we really didn't know, quote unquote, how to solve menopause or how to address this gap in menopause care and knowledge and education. And so what we started with, she had been very influential in Neutrogena, selling it to Johnson & Johnson and developing a product. So we took that product and set up an e-commerce store, called it Gennev, started publishing education for women because I knew that content would bring people to the website and optimizing that for search. And lo and behold, we started to build a community of women. And from that community, we started to hear, I don't feel heard. My doctor doesn't answer my questions. Who should I go see? And we saw this big gap in women's healthcare and menopause. And so that's really where we pivoted the business. And that's how Gennev came to be, a national kind of telehealth clinic for women in menopause.
That is fascinating, and that it was community driven in a lot of ways. And I love that you came at it from that angle. And that's surprising to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think the best ideas come from the people you're trying to serve. And I think in my career, every time I felt stuck or, God, what direction should I go or whatever, I always lean hard into my customer or the person that I'm trying to serve to glean the insights. And you'll eventually get them if you listen long enough.
Listening, the superpower.
Yeah.
What were the things that when you started your career, what were your key drivers? I'm curious for you, like what were your values? What are the things that throughout your life have been some of those key threads?
I think first and foremost, being ethical, being authentic. I'm very opportunistic and I'm naively opportunistic in ways that I don't overthink things too much. I'm not a very planful person. In fact, I'm hopeful. I am a glass half full. I am a builder. I am a go figure this out. How hard can it be sort of thinker. And so throughout my career, even at Microsoft, a very big structured company, I had multiple careers that are very different from one another because, the opportunities that I took on were either things that no one had done before and it was trailblazing, or it was a big, hard, gnarly problem that might have been intimidating to most. And I, not that I'm like some strong, kind of thinker. I'm more so, I'm kind of fearless naturally, thankfully. And so as I moved towards this entrepreneurial move of starting Gennev, that kicked in again. And I am in my flow and at my best when I am in a uncharted territory, big ambiguity kind of sort of space. And I think those are the characteristics of me that I've carried throughout my career. And those are the things like when I start to get restless in a job or in a part of my career, I know my happy place is getting back to that land of unknown, that trailblazing start, that turnaround, whatever, and it's time to make a change. So I now use that as a spidey sense, in a sense, to shift directions and shift gears.
I love that your comfort zone is the discomfort zone.
Yeah, yeah. It's that's good and bad, I suppose. It's not always the most financially lucrative because being the first at something or whatever. But I I have had to get used to. I think the hardest part of that is you are the lone wolf a lot, or you have to really work hard to get others to come along. But oftentimes you're the person at the helm, or you're the only person in that space for a bit while you figure it out before you build the team or make the movement or whatever. And I'd say that is probably knowing that, oh, I'm going back into that solo, that lonely space, that I'm on my own sort of place. That's probably the most challenging part of it.
Yeah. What's the part of the process that is your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. There's like a cycle around where you're in your flow doing your thing, and you can't stay in your flow always, and you move into kind of discomfort, and then you need to go into this place of kind of cocooning, and I call this cocooning phase around like consuming, ingesting, like trying to figure out how do I get back to flow. And it's emotionally challenging and sad and tough. Everyone wants to be in flow in our careers and in our lives. Those are the happy places. But when I'm in that cocooning phase, and I've seen cycles in my career, like it's about every 10 years. Some people are every 7 years, the magic seven. I find that when I'm in that cocooning phase, it is emotionally raw, but I consume so much, whether it's books or podcasts or running and exercise. Like I'm healthy, even though I'm somewhat sad within. I grow so much during those periods. So looking back on that, I'm always like, wow, I really leaped forward in that. Or, and so knowing, even though it's hard, I kind of look forward to that moment because I know something new is going to blossom coming out of it.
Mm. What you're saying also resonates really deeply with me because, so I'm a Hudson certified coach, and their whole methodology around change and how we renew as human beings is there's a stage called cocooning. So
Oh,
it's funny that, so it's so spot on for me. And it's the idea of like getting ready. So when you're like, like you're starting off to get something new, then you're getting started, you're rocking and rolling, you're in flow. Then there's the doldrums where you start to get disenchanted. And then you go into cocooning, which is sort of like that liquid DNA, exactly as you said, where you go and you're reading a lot and you're basically you're soaking in so much and you're figuring out what's going to stay and what you're going to let go of. And it's a really interesting time. So
mm,
that's for you to speak about it in that way is fascinating because it is that idea of bringing in a lot, but then I'm sure that there also comes a period of discernment where it's about what do you keep and what do you let go of.
mhm, mm. Yeah, yeah, it is. And I hadn't thought about it that, what do you keep and what do you let go of? But yeah, there are things you let go of because you're constantly, it's you're in your own head and you're thinking about, God, I wish I would have done that different, or God, that doesn't really work for me anymore, or maybe I shouldn't have been doing that to begin with. How do I change that moving forward about me? So it is a super, super powered period of, self-reflection. And it can feel sometimes like you're beating yourself up, or I do,
Mm.
um, and yet coming out of it, it just, I don't know, you just feel so refreshed. It's like spring season or something. So yeah, that's an interesting parallel. And we all go through it. So embracing and knowing that that's coming, I guess, is the most healthy mindset you can have.
I also find that a lot of people really struggle with that because of the reflection, because they don't want to spend that time sitting in it.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It's uncomfortable because you look at your own faults, failures, weaknesses. Oh, I really thought I was like really great at that, and I'm not, that's humbling. It's vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and I remember one of the things that you said to me when we were prepping for this call is you said, I don't like to be the smartest person in the room.
No, no. When you're the smartest person in the room, you're not growing anymore. Like, I want to work to keep up with others because if I'm keeping up, I'm going to rise to a new level that I wasn't capable of before. It's kind of like I used to play basketball in high school, and I was going to play it in college, and just and I love basketball. I love watching it now. I love that sport. But when you played kind of a subpar or mediocre team, you
Mhm.
played mediocre. And you just didn't, I don't, but the best games were when you were playing the toughest competition and you probably maybe got beat. But you're like, wow, that was a really amazing game because it caused me to work so much harder to play to their level. And the same thing with the smartest person in the room. So, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder. So oftentimes I'm the person out in charge or out ahead. And so getting that, infusion of, there's a while, especially when you're founding a company, before you can afford and bring in talent that you're trying to keep up with. And because you're either the only person or you've got resources that are kind of part time or helping you out or, more junior. And that's a hard thing to sometimes wrestle through for someone who loves to not be the smartest person in the room. Probably
Definitely.
one of the biggest challenges for me.
You're making me think about how do you as a founder and a CEO navigate that? How do you balance that with the idea of like being that person that doesn't necessarily have all the answers, but has the confidence and the knowledge of what you need to know, but how do you get okay with what you don't know?
I think oftentimes I constantly, as a founder or when I'm starting something new, I constantly had the mindset, well, what do I have to lose? Like, who else is going to do it? And you're looking around, nobody, So it's just up to you. You have no choice. It's survival. And so that's then translates probably into the fearless point or the, well, I'll go figure it out or I'll go ask this person because you have no other choice. And it makes you learn. I've had to learn how to ask for help through that journey. I wasn't good at it prior to starting a company. And I think it's held me back throughout my life until now. And now, I've got my team they challenge me all the time and they're pushing me and I love it, and they're experts in their area. And it's just, it's really fun. It's enriching.
Mm. What was it like when you were starting the business? How did that come into play when you were starting Gennev? I mean, like you talk about liking to problem solve. I mean, that's one of the core threads that I'm hearing here. What were I mean, obviously you had a lot of problems to solve, but I'm curious for you, what were the ones that are most memorable as you think about founding Gennev?
Founding what was one of my kind of mentors said, Jill, you didn't even just set out to like start a company, which is hard, and raise venture capital and all the things, but she goes, you had to start one in menopause. She said, that's a like no one wants to say the word, no one wants, it's shameful, it means you're aging. And I think the hardest thing for me was not caring what other people thought of me personally by starting a company focused on menopause. Like, it screams, oh, Jill must be in menopause, or she must be having a miserable menopause. Otherwise, she wouldn't have started this. I wasn't even in perimenopause yet. And yet, to also appeal to women, I needed to help them, make them understand that I understood them. I was in it with them. I was experiencing the same thing, even though I might not be in that moment. And so there was this, kind of catch 22. I needed to be very quote unquote menopause sympathetic and empathetic because I, those were my people. And then at the same time with former colleagues on LinkedIn, very publicly, I had to promote my company and our mission and all the things we were doing in a way that I didn't care what other people thought about me relative to a very personal thing. Now, it's not a topic of, wealth management or, supply chain or something like that. It's menopause, and it's a part of healthcare that people just don't want to admit or talk about. And it's gotten better now, but I think that was probably the hardest adjustment along the way.
Yeah, it's almost like decoupling the business from like the personal from the professional, but still
Mhm.
being yourself and showing up personally and authentically at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
And how that sounds like a courageous move too, because you're dealing with a topic that a lot of people aren't comfortable with, and you're going through that idea of identifying as a woman, but also identifying as a founder of a company. I'm curious for you, where do you think you really drew from courage in this experience?
I think on the days where that felt really hard, I knew that if I had a good sleep, the courage would come back to face the things I was dreading, or the the comments or the feedback or the no's I had received from the day before. And so what gave me the courage, I I didn't want to fail. I don't want to fail. I hate failing. I hate failing. And you got to say, oh, it's okay to fail because then you learn through it and all the things. And yes, I know, especially with a trailblazing startup in a topic, you got to fail a lot to learn really, really well. And you got to try things, and you're going to fail at some, you're going to succeed at others. So I get that. And it's not that I avoid it, but I never could face the notion of the business failing, like shutting down the business. That to me was like, I didn't give it my all. Like, I was raised with an ethos that you can work your way through anything. You can work hard enough. If you're the hardest worker, you can kind of work your way through anything. And that's not always, the case, but that was just how I was raised. And so I thought, around every problem, even at the most dire moments, I couldn't make payroll, or I thought I'd be closing it or whatever, there was always a solution to the problem if you just pick it apart small by bit by bit. And I just never wanted to fail. And it was like getting by counts too. We might have competitors that come in after us and they're bigger than us, but being around till the bitter end, there is no end. Being around forever mattered most to me, because it shows that this is, we have approached this topic in the business smartly, with incredible integrity and intention of not ever letting women down. And to have to close down the business felt like, oh, menopause is never going to be solved. Oh, that's another example of women's health, or women in general getting smacked down. And so it kind of represented that in my mind. And so, yeah, I didn't want I didn't want the business to fail.
Wow. I didn't even think about the idea of failing women. I mean, like, it's hard enough if your business doesn't make it, but that is a whole other level of responsibility and just weight that you were going through too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like when you see other healthcare startups for women close down, or
Yeah.
if you see, female, founders having a harder time accessing capital because of different, culture changing dynamics and, administration driven policies and so forth. That again is another smackdown of women. And it's just, we're strong enough, we're big enough, and we're like, we are resilient human beings. And you often hear, oh, it's just another example of women's health not being prioritized, or another example of women founders not being prioritized. And I want us to be seen as equal as much as possible. And so we're going to have to just be as sleuthy and problem solving as we can, and supportive of one another to break through, to make these differences. And I look at women who fought for voting rights or all the things. They didn't have an easy road, but they just kind of persevered. And, I think even to this day on topics, even just like my business around menopause, to me, it just feels similar, or that's the thread I draw upon.
Was there ever a moment when you knew that it was working, that you knew that you were successful?
I don't know if there's ever a moment where you're just like, yeah, I did it. It's good. But when I sold the company, so 2 years ago, we were acquired by Unified Women's Healthcare, a wonderful women's healthcare company. That to me felt like, oh, we're going to be okay. And we might continue in some different version than who we are today. We might lose, I don't know, we might further integrate, and the team might break up, and be part of a bigger company. And as it should, that's oftentimes when you acquire companies, that's how you integrate them and you become better together and all of that. we might look different in the future than we do at the moment. But when we went through that acquisition, I felt two things. Number one, I don't have to worry about, just kind of this cycle of raising money, going to pitch and raise for money. Like we've got it's not endless coffers, but we've got a sustainable engine that knows how to operate in women's healthcare. That was the number one thing. And number two, for me, I was, so excited to be part of a community of like-minded, mission-driven people focused on better access to quality women's healthcare. And Unified's focus is very much on, and belief, if you treat the physician right, if you support the physician, the patient is going to have better outcomes. And that is so true. And so I just, it just was so almost comforting. And I kind of took a breath to say, it's kind of back to not the smartest person in the room. We're part of a broader community that is driving towards even bigger and better women's healthcare outcomes. And now we're doing it together. And that there's always progress in quantity and masses and, more people than fewer.
All right, everybody, we need to pause for a quick break and we will be right back. Stay tuned. Each episode of The Courage Effect offers you a chance to meet inspiring guests, hear their stories, and spread what we call courageous contagion. The podcast's mission is to amplify courage in your lives, workplaces, and communities. So how can you be a conduit for courage and support this podcast? The best no-cost way is simple. Subscribe or follow The Courage Effect and leave a comment or a review. You taking the time to do this helps us get the word out, to reach more people and amplify what's important to you. It also ensures that you won't miss any future episodes. I'm so honored that you're a part of this community, and I'm glad you're here. Now back to the show. I'm thinking about, like the courage to create change, and that's really one of the bigger themes of the show. And for you, obviously you did that when you founded Gennev and bringing it about. What do you see now as your biggest challenge in being able to create change?
The pace of creating change has slowed as we're part of a bigger company. So when you're a smaller organization on your own, you're pretty nimble. You can, be, just all the good things that come with that. In a bigger company, it's to create change. It just happens slower. And you also don't have permission to fail in the same ways, partly because there's bigger stakes. Like, you're impacting a bigger set of patients. You're creating mistrusts with physicians. You've got regulatory pressure, and so I would say it's more, it's slower, but it's more legitimate and it's tested and tried and foolproof in a way, pressure tested in ways that it wasn't when we were more agile and nimble and driving change really quickly.
How have the stakes now changed for you when you look at what's ahead?
Before, as Gennev on our own, we were a little bit of a big fish in a small pond. And now, and me even personally, I was a bigger fish in a small pond. Now I'm a small fish in a big pond of women's healthcare, established clinics. There's over 900 clinics, care centers in the Unified affiliate network. And, the stakes are so much higher. And so operating in that kind of space, it's less about, quote unquote, this scrappy startup and our mission and even the founder. And it's more about the outcomes of the whole and being part of something bigger. And that's a mind shift change. It's a change for your ego. And it just calls for new levels of maturity and understanding the perspective of others and where they're coming from when you might not agree on a topic or on an approach or something like that.
Yeah. I'm curious, what are you most proud of about your journey?
I think having the courage to start it in the first place. But I don't know that it was courage. I think it was naive optimism, masqueraded as courage. I don't know, so I don't know that I'd ever call myself courageous because I I just thought it should be done and I could do it. Um, Whether that was, kind of arrogant or what, it was what I had. And so I'm most proud that that I did that, and that during the darkest moments, and there were so many, I didn't quit. I didn't stop. And that to me tells me if I got through that, I'll be able to get through this, that, and the other in the future. It really builds fearlessness and resiliency. And, I'm less worried about so many things in life, even personally.
Mm. So it starts off with what you said, naivete, being a little bit open to like, okay,
Yeah.
why not? I mean, it sounds like a lot of it is why not and why not me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. And I and I realize that's not everyone has that or feels that.
Yeah.
And so I don't take that for granted. Um, and there's plenty of bad moves or mistakes I've made because I am that way, because I am maybe naive or, or so optimistic. Some people are like, get real, Jill. You're so optimistic, or you're Pollyannish or whatever. And I'm sure there's all sorts of, things I could have done differently because I am that way, but that's the way I am. And I've learned to just embrace it and use it to the best means possible.
I love that. And I have so much respect for it because I do feel like there's enough people that are trying to bring us so much reality when sometimes we have enough already.
Yes, totally. Yes, for sure.
What's one of the biggest things that you've learned along the way?
Patience. I had to learn not to chase things so much and to let some things happen or to come to me or to quit pestering that investor that hasn't responded or, just lean back. I got to a point where I was leaning in so hard on everything. I'm like, if you don't go after it, you're not going to get it. Because you hear that all the time. If you don't ask for it, you're not getting it. If you don't push, you're not, whatever. And those things matter, but I almost got too much over on the chasing, pushing, um, just driving, that it almost made me look desperate, or I became submissive to the process or to the people I was looking for capital from or help or whatever it is, a contract. And if there's one thing I've learned is lean back, because that's where I've matured. I would say be patient. The right things will happen if they're supposed to. And if you're working too hard for something to happen and it's not happening, then it's probably not the right move or it's not the right thing.
If you could go back and coach your earlier self before you started the Gennev journey, what would it be?
I'm not big on regrets or do-overs or whatever, because I kind of think every failure, everything happens because then it leads you to something else.
Mhm.
So I was a constant advice seeker. Everything I've done throughout the founding journey, I've done for the first time. It was the first time starting a company, raising capital, um, doing something in menopause. We were the first menopause company. Like, it was all firsts. And I constantly sought out guidance. How do I pitch this, or how do I do the deck, and I get insights and help from so many people, and I probably would take less input and just go. I think if there's one thing, maybe I would tell myself, do more than learn and plan, and you'll learn faster. You'll get to the right answer faster than if you just really try to perfect it out of the gate. Take longer to do that.
Yeah. Is there any self doubt mixed in there? Is it about like trusting your gut a little bit more as
Mhm.
well?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yes. We all waver, and there's moments where I've trusted my gut a lot, but I think I lost how to trust it because I was in such unfamiliar territory. I didn't know what felt comfortable and what felt, I just, you're upside down. You don't even know what right side is up.
Yeah, you're making me think of like surfing or something and just being like tumbling in the water
In
and
the
not
wave.
knowing where you're
Yes.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. Is there any advice that you didn't take that you feel that you're happy that you didn't take when you were going through this process?
When I was toying with the idea of finding an acquirer, or going with an exit on the company versus raising another round of capital. I had an advisor who was very influential in the business, and she just was like bullish on, Jill, go get another round of capital. Don't exit yet. It's premature. And she really was pushing me a lot to not. And she's a really successful, trusted person. And I did not take that advice. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm really glad I didn't. I didn't, because I just feel, no path is perfect, but given economic conditions, given the progress we've made, given, I think, even our sustainability and how healthcare is, the economic model of it, the direction of it. Like, I just think the move to join the establishment and a larger organization was the right thing to do, because now before we were driving change on our own, and now we're driving change within, and we're changing from within. And while it feels slower, the momentum and the gravitas and the access to great quality healthcare will be 10 times greater than if we would have continued to do it on our own.
Talk to us a little bit about Gennev in general. How would you recommend that women seek it out? I'm curious to know, like, as you scale it, and make women more comfortable in the menopause conversation, and knowing that there's resources out there.
I think first, we all, if you were born with ovaries, you're going to go through it to some degree. So know that you are, and just like every phase of your life, it's incumbent upon you to get educated in it. Now, when we were kids, we're educated on puberty and, sex ed to the degree that, we had a ecosystem that educated us on that. And those are all necessities. And so we were kind of, giggly about it, but we were somewhat prepared, or at least aware. Going into perimenopause, women are not. And I think increasingly now women are so, but there's a lot of influencers. There's a lot of Instagram. There's a lot of TikTok. There's good information, and there's not good information. And so I would share with women, if you want trusted, clinical, evidence-based guidance, education, care, come to Gennev.com. There's so many resources. You don't have to come and see a doctor. You don't have to come and see a dietitian. When you're ready to, we have an incredible team. Nationally, we can serve patients in every state. We're part of health plans, benefit plans at employers. But don't put it off. I think my biggest piece of advice to women is, if you're curious, start reading about it. There's so much. And if you want to, so many women are like, what do I believe? What's true and what's not? Because I'm inundated by all these things. At the end of the day, I can't underscore enough. That's why we've built Gennev the way we have. And it might not be the loudest thing in social media or on stage or with celebrities, but it is the most fact-safe, evidence-based care and education you're going to find. And I owe that to my clinical team. I have just an incredible clinical team. And so that would be kind of my shout out, is come to Gennev.com. There's so many questions. If you just even have one, chat it to us, and start, really taking control of your health in this next phase of life.
So important. And I think one of the things that I think about is, before I got into menopause, I was scared because my mother had terrible hot flashes, and women around me were going through all different sorts of experiences. And what I really learned was, your mother's menopause or your friend's menopause is not necessarily yours. It's a different journey for everybody. And just because you're seeing one person exhibit some, symptoms or otherwise, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be your path.
Yeah. Our chief medical officer, Dr. Rebecca Dunsmore-Sue, often says, she said, I always say to other clinicians, when you've seen one woman in menopause, you've seen one woman in menopause. She said, every patient's going to be different. And she has seen thousands, just thousands and thousands. So it's unique to us.
Yes. One final question on the menopause front. How would you advise men or partners that are supporting women going through menopause? Because it's not always the easiest experience for them either.
No, it isn't. We have a fair amount of men who come to us and just ask, which I think is just wonderful. I think more than anything, know that she's not in control of the things she's complaining about, or sometimes her own behavior. If she's lashing out, if she's raging, if she's more emotional, if she can't sleep and she's a wreck, there's more there that she can't control than she realizes, and she doesn't know that. And she's frustrated by it. Just if you think you're frustrated, she's even more. And so I think patience, you want to care for her and you want to care for you too at the same time. And so, oftentimes our guidance to men is encouraging them to show her that you love and care for her, even through the thing that is maybe not great for both of you. And then second of all, send her to Gennev.com, and just say what? Every woman goes through what you're experiencing in a different way. I don't know if you're talking about it with friends, but there is a community that can support you in ways that I probably can't. And I wish I could support you in that way, but I just don't get it because I'm not going through it.
Thank you for that. I do think it's important because they're obviously impacted by it too. So as we close out the conversation, what more would you share with listeners just as we say goodbye? What, as far as your path, your journey, courage, what's really standing out for you?
I think that with every path and journey, there comes moments there's peaks and valleys, obviously, but then there's also these moments of change. We talked about, the flow, the doldrums, the cocooning, and the transition in life. And I think for me, obviously, and he's as a leader in any team or business or no matter where, when it's your time to make a change or to step aside so others can rise up, recognizing what that looks like and managing your ego through it is, I think, one of the hardest things. And, I won't deny that I'm not going through that myself right now, as I've come through this cycle of starting a company and making it into something and changing the face of menopause. We created a category of care that didn't exist before, like in the way that it is. And then to take it to the mainstream through an acquisition, and now we're part of a bigger company, it's come through a cycle. What's my role in it going forward in the role that I've played in the past? And am I equipped for that next role, or is it my time to step aside? And those are things I'll share that I'm wrestling with at this transition. I think I'm at a transition point, or, the business is certainly. And I think that's hard, because that takes courage too, to realize where you're at. And again, it's a lot of ego check, so I would leave this conversation with knowing that when things don't feel like they're in their flow, or like if you feel like you're plateauing a little bit, it's not because you're not successful or you lost your edge, or you're not, it's maybe time for a change.
Listen to yourself. Right. I love that. And it is the idea of, instead of forcing it to, that's the other thing that I heard in this conversation is listen to it, see what it's saying to you, and do some investigation before you do something rash.
Yeah. And there's been lots of rash moments throughout my life, for sure, because I'm not a patient person. So I'm working on that.
I am too. Lifelong goals.
Yes, for sure.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your work. It's meant a lot to me and a lot of women in my life. So thank you for that. But keep on going. I'm excited to see what's next in your journey, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me today. I loved the conversation, and I hope it's helpful.
Yes. Thank you, Jill. And to all of you listening out there, thank you for tuning in. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. If you're looking for a coach, maybe a speaker, or a consultant to help you or your team enhance your leadership, become more adaptable, or build more courageous workplaces, we would love to have a conversation with you. More information is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. You taking a few minutes to rate or review your favorite episodes or sharing them with people in your universe makes a big difference. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more information about me, the show, our guests, or apply to be a guest on the show, please contact us via our website at thecourageeffect.com. It takes a village to bring this show to you. I want to thank Alex Sandyforth for her production and administrative superpowers, Dave Nilsson for composing our theme music, and I am your host, Suzanne Weller.